Hello, everybody. Welcome to Inspirational Journeys. My name is Ann Harrison, and as you can tell, I am only on YouTube at this moment due to unforeseen circumstances with the previous Spotify for Podcasters platform that I was on, and due to some rebranding changes. And I will be telling everybody once I get the podcast back onto your podcast players with a new feed. I will be letting you know about any upcoming changes here on YouTube. And if you sign up for my email list, I will be letting you know there as well. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started, before I introduce my special guest. I have been on a bit of a hiatus, A, due to the Thanksgiving holiday, B, due to the fact that I have been a bit under the weather this past week. So that's why you haven't seen me on YouTube. Um, in a couple weeks. But you will be seeing me today as I'm recording this because I will be uploading this. And I have a fabulous guest to introduce to you because she writes and Lynn, tell me if I'm wrong. She writes weird like I do. Uh, so welcome to the show, Lynn Katz.
It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And I love talking about books. And I was just before we started uh, recording this, you and I were talking about your books. So it's just so much fun to
Oh
be here.
yes. Yes. Writing fantasy. Sorry, my phone is talking at me. Thank you. Writing fantasy and writing stories for young readers is I found that, you know, that's where God called me in this space. So as well as I love my poetry, but that's another topic for another day. So why don't you introduce yourself before I go off
Okay,
on my tangent?
I'd love to. Okay, I'll start by saying that I am a grandma. I came to writing professionally, if you want to call it that, later. I've always loved to write, but I wrote a lot of poetry growing up. I still write poetry.
Oh,
I used to be a teacher and a curriculum specialist and a school principal, and I didn't have time. I know that's a common excuse, and maybe it's a bad one, but I didn't have the bandwidth to really devote to writing novels until I retired. So now I've been retired, and that's when I really took my writing seriously. And I did write a an adult thriller, domestic thriller. I had this idea in my head and I had to get it out of my head.
mm-hmm.
Then I started writing just for children. So right now I'm mostly writing middle grade. And you and I think, are going to talk a lot about this book. It's called Chester and the Magic Eight Ball, which was published by Black Rose Writing, my publisher, back in February. So this is my first middle grade book that I've ever written. Since then, I have about four others that I'm working on in various stages. And that's that's the nutshell version.
So how did you know when you were called to write?
I've always enjoyed writing as a child. I can't tell you the day, but
Was
I
there,
would
oh, sorry.
no, there was no like, it was just kind of natural. I like to rhyme. I like to write poems when I was growing up. I think maybe my parents encouraged it as well because they loved what I wrote. So I think as a parent and as a grandparent, I think it's important. And as a teacher, it's important for adults in children's lives to encourage and celebrate their attempts, even if they're not masterpieces, right? You don't want to squelch creativity. And I was lucky to have, especially my mother, who encouraged my creativity.
Mm, okay. So, and I was gonna say, was there an aha moment that uh
Um, no, there was no aha moment. It was just writing was always fun for me. When I was a teacher, I taught third grade, and I always loved teaching writing and writing with the kids. And especially, I loved teaching writing poetry.
oh,
And do you know the name Georgia Hurd?
no, not that name doesn't ring a bell.
Well, if any teachers in elementary school would know it, because she's written books about how to teach poetry. And one of her books is called Awakening the Heart. It's an amazing book, how to teach poetry, and it's filled with poems. and she's got a second edition coming out, and one of my poems is in that edition, and I feel like that's, I've made it now.
Wow.
I have a
We
poem in Georgia Hurd's book, so I'm excited.
all I can say is we connect on so many levels because I write poetry too. I actually had a poet published a poetry book. Um,
For
but yeah,
children or adults?
no, for adult. I mean, I think there was a poem for children in there, but it
Hmm.
was primarily for adults. But it was that I'd have to tell you my poetry story in a bit,
I want to hear it.
oh well, okay. But anyway, so a friend of mine was she did a prompt, and I can't write poetry. It's Poetry was really rare for me at the time. And she did this 50-word story prompt.
Hmm.
Um, and she said it was mermaid fingernails because those really long, skinny seashells.
Hmm.
Her niece called them mermaid fingernails. And I tried to write a 50-word story. Maybe I got there, but it morphed into a poem. And that very day I wrote 3 poems. And since then, I don't write poems at the drop of a hat like that, but when a poem hits, I write it.
It's fun, isn't it? And
Oh yeah.
it's just, if it feels like a novel takes a really long time. A
It
poem could too, but
yeah, and you could tweak it and keep
yeah,
plucking
yeah,
at it. But poetry can sometimes be really quick.
you can, and it can be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your process. Did you outline your book or are you a
Okay.
discovery writer?
I guess I'm a discovery writer. I really have, yeah, and I have critique partners who are always telling me, you should, you should. I've read about how to outline, and I enjoy as you call it, discovery. I'm a pantser. I
Yes.
pantser, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what's going to happen until I sit down and it comes from some other world or subconscious level where the story goes surprises me. I always start with a premise, like a what if.
Mm-hmm.
So for this book, Chester and the Magic 8 Ball, my what if a dog could tell the future using a magic 8 ball?
Oh.
I went from there to the character. So I start with a premise, a character. So I have an idea of, I have a lot of ideas. I might brainstorm a bunch of ideas or do a little web, but I don't have a complete outline, and I never know how my book is going to end. I don't recommend doing it this way. It's just what I do. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Vision.
I was gonna ask you because I'm in that world building stage too. Do you do your world building as you write?
Well, here, I'm not sure if what I do would be considered world building. Maybe it would be, but for example, this book, it's a contemporary book. So the world is something I know very well. It takes place in an elementary school. It takes place in a
Right.
girl's house. But another book I've been working on is historical fiction. So I had to do a lot of research, and it takes place 19 in the early 1950s, and it's about a girl. It's about a flood here in Connecticut, where I live. It actually happened, and about a girl who had polio. So I did a lot of research about that world. And I have to tell you how much fun it was. I interviewed people, I went online, but that's different from the kind of world building that has to come from your imagination, I think,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah. Because you have to research to
Yeah,
center your story around the world that's already there.
exactly. Exactly.
But you still had to build the magic system for the magic 8 ball.
Well, here's the thing with my book. Okay. In the book, this is a rescue dog, and it's based on my rescue dog. Um, a toothless rescue dog. This little girl is desperate for a pet. She's begging, begging, begging. She finally rescues Chester and discovers he can tell the future with the magic 8 ball. But as you read the book, she's learning about probability in school, about math, and her teacher. And so she basically, even though he gets it right every time, there she has to learn the difference between probability and magic. So you don't really, I mean, it is almost impossible. It's inconceivable that he would get it right every time, right?
Right.
But I don't want to give away the story too much. But for example, her math project is about coin flipping. So she'll say, Chester, will this be, will I get tails when I flip this coin? So Chester takes the magic 8 ball, rolls it around, whatever the answer is. Let's say it's, you can count on it, or just yes, or whatever the answer is. And do you know what magic 8 balls are like? You know.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother used to have one.
Yeah. So whatever the answer is, then she flips the coin and he gets it right. So if he says it's tails, it's tails. Now, every time you can say, well, there's a 50-50 chance, but it's really almost impossible to get it right, even
Every time.
every time. And he does, and he blows everybody's mind. The teacher can't believe it. So is it magic or is it probability?
Yeah, that's a question that kids will wanna, I'm sure will wanna ask.
Yeah.
So, did you what tips and takeaways did you learn from writing this book?
What tips did I?
Yeah, what golden nuggets did you learn about the craft as you wrote the book?
Yeah. Well, one thing I think somebody once asked me this in terms of the revision process.
Mm-hmm.
I had an agent for this book, and I think she was the one who suggested rewriting it in the first person. It was in the third person, and it really made a difference. So I think making all those decisions ahead of time is important. Otherwise, you're going to really spend a lot of time revising. And for me, I think kids appreciate first person often when you want them to really get in the head of the main character and feel close to the main character. Not
That
that, right?
right, that's what I've learned too, because I started writing mine in third person and then in first person. And then, of course, I did this before when it what would morphed into an adult book at first. Then my character said, "Let me tell my story." Okay, and I started doing that, but I found doing it in an adult book format, the research bogged me down. So that's why I felt called to switch to the middle grade. Tried to do that in third person. Becca said again, "No, I need to tell my story."
Yeah,
So that's when I started, and I found that I like writing in first person.
I like it too. And
I love it.
I do too. It just feels more natural. And you don't have to have this omniscient narrator out there who knows everything, and I don't,
Exactly.
yeah. So
And
surprise.
and it helps you get into the head of your character too.
I think so. I
It
definitely
does.
think so. Yeah.
So do you think your career as a teacher and a librarian helped you to brought you to
Yes,
the
no doubt. I was never a librarian. I was a curriculum specialist, but mostly I was a teacher and a school principal.
oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
No, you interview a lot of people, but
I do.
it helped me. And it I feel like there's this theme across all my writing, and that is I want children to love school. I want the teachers to be nurturing. I want the parents to be flawed, but loving,
Mm-hmm.
because I want kids to feel that they are not powerless in this world. I think you and I talked about that with an
Right.
email. I want kids to feel a sense of agency because they're living in a world where they really don't have a lot of power. So
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a choice about what book do you want to read versus we're all going to read this book right now, whether you like it or not. So I tend to make my teachers in this book in particular, he's a really cool guy. So a lot of kids have told me how much they love Mr. Barnett. The math teacher, and he really gets kids, and he's got this silly sense of humor with silly riddles, but he's just he really listens to them. And I don't know, maybe I'm trying to be preachy in that sense, but it's subtle.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So let's get to the fun part because for you guys watching out there, I've heard you. You say you like to read alouds, and I've seen the videos with the read aloud to get the you get more. I get more views from those. So, would you do the honor of reading an excerpt from your book?
Oh, sure. Okay, so I didn't prepare a specific excerpt, but
That's fine.
you want me to start from the beginning or someplace in the middle?
Why don't you start from the beginning just to give
Okay.
the viewers a
Context.
teaser? Yeah, little
Okay.
context. Yeah.
So the first chapter is called Bored. I turn my magic 8 ball around in my hands, warming it up. I don't believe a silly old toy has any more power than a four-leaf clover, but that doesn't stop me. I might be too old to believe in magic, but like most people, I make a wish right before I blow out my birthday candles. And whenever I see a falling star, you never know, right? I shake my magic 8 ball a few times and squeeze my eyes tight. I blast my question into the universe like it's a rocket headed for the moon. Will I get a dog today? I don't just want a dog. I need a dog. My family needs a dog. Any kind of dog would do. A long-haired, yappy, flea-bitten mongrel, a purebred with a smushed-up face, a dog with short legs and a stubby tail, or even a dog with a runny nose. There ought to be a law. When you don't have siblings, your parents get a dog, especially when you've been stuck in a boring house for 5 boring days of a boring February vacation, especially when the weather is miserable and your best friend Emma is skiing with her family in Vermont. If I had a dog, I wouldn't be bored and I wouldn't be lonely. And maybe my parents would stop arguing. Dogs are even more magical than blowing out birthday candles on your cake, more magical than any silly toy. You can stop me whenever, okay?
Okay, yeah, let's stop there because
Okay.
that will, yeah, that'll definitely that'll get that'll give people a teaser.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, there's some hints in there that not only does she want a dog, but she wants her parents to stop arguing. So I will tell you that this book does deal with some heavy issues for 12-year-old kids or
mm-hmm.
8 to 12-year-old kids, but they're real issues that they are
Oh
facing.
yeah.
And, you know, she gets her dog. Well, the question is she going to get her parents to stop arguing, or is their marriage um not within her control, really?
Right. Right. So, if people want to connect with, if you want to read the blurb, you can do that too, because I know you mentioned that before we started recording.
Do you want me to do that? Read the back cover?
Yeah, because you mentioned you said you mentioned that you would be willing to do that. So,
To do that. And I'm also, this is going to sound really braggy, but I got a Kirkus review and I got
ooh,
I got a star, which is like,
cool.
I can't believe it. So I like what they wrote. They said, and now it's on the back of my books, an uplifting middle grade story that meets sadness head on and cuddles up to what's important in life. I just love that. And
I do too.
yeah, I mean, it's funny. There's funny parts in the book, but it'll get you. So here's the back. 12-year-old Georgia believes her toothless rescue dog is psychic. With a spin of a magic 8 ball, Chester predicts the future with a high degree of probability. He assures Georgia the outlook is good for her parents' troubled marriage. He wows her math class by predicting heads or tails with every coin toss. But when the stakes are life or death, Georgia must learn the difference between magic and probability and find her own powers to increase the likelihood of a happy ending. Chester and the Magic 8 Ball is an empowering story of hope for anyone facing life's unexpected challenges.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So, if anybody wants to connect with you or learn more about your writing, where would they go?
they can go to my website and there's a form to email me, to connect with me very easily. And the website is really simple. It's www.lynnkatzauthor.com. So all one word, lynnkatzauthor.com.
Okay.
And you can also, I do school visits. I love doing school visits. It's my favorite thing about being a published author, interacting with kids. So that's also, if you want to connect with me and you know someone who, an elementary school or a middle grade school that might be interested, let me know.
Okie doke. So, are there any final words you would like to leave the viewers with before we close?
Sure. I'm going to give you a quote from Jarrett. Oh God, I forgot his last name. He's an author, a children's author, but it's a quote that I love, and it's great for kids, but it's good for adults too. And that is this: you are capable of incredible things, but it will involve a lot of hard work and failure.
Mm,
I think it's true. And if we know that we're capable and accept that there will be obstacles along the way and we're going to have to work hard at it and we'll fail a few times, we pick ourselves up. I think it's an important message for all of us.
yep, very much so. So, we challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us here on Inspirational Journeys. And remember, your story matters. And also, thank you for joining me today, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Anne. It was a pleasure.